In Homestead, Florida, stands one of this generation's megalithic structures, built by a single man named Ed Leedskalnin. First in Florida City, he relocated the entire castle to Homestead, Florida, where he completed the work. Frequently compared to the pyramids at Giza, the heads of Easter Island, and Stonehenge, we look at Coral Castle. One giant question remains. How did he build this? The only first-hand accounts that we have of other people watching Ed work is only at night, where he has been said to sing to the stones that now make up what he called Rock Gate. Many of these single pieces of rock weigh over 1,000 tons, and the question remains, how did he do this? We explore this question among many other questions about the nature of our reality, hidden technology, mathematics, and the world energy grid. Come along with me on this journey as we look into just how Ed Leedskalnin created Coral Castle. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Yissel Missile Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissel, and today we are continuing our deep dive series on Ed Leedskalnin and his Coral Castle. I'm glad to have you all here tonight. Just wanted to point a few things out before we get started. I did start a goal for the chat. If we can get 5 super chats tonight, I will read an extra chapter, so chapter 21. And if we don't hit it, it's okay, but I'd like to see us hit that goal today. But we will be continuing our read through of The Energy Grid by Cathie. We have 2 chapters to read today, which are titled From Alpha to Omega and Something in the Air. So, we'll just give this a moment, because I believe we're having some streaming issues here. Hopefully that's not the case. Yeah, we'll give it a moment here. Not sure what's going on. We have really low bit rate here. Okay. Seems we're back. That's really strange. Okay. Alright, we're back up and running. You see, this happens every now and then. We get some stream delays. That's unfortunate. We're good now. Let me know on the other side there if you guys are having any issues as well. But anyways, last week was really interesting. We covered Coral Castle's relation to Stonehenge. Man. Hey, Texas, let me know if you're having any streaming issues here. Because it looks like it's dropping me. Of course, this never happens until I do this, this chat goal. Of course. Alright. We'll continue on then. Texas Learning is saying the stream seems fine, so we'll carry on. Yeah, it's like I'm getting red bars here. 31% dropped frames. There, then the music cuts out. Great. Okay, it should be okay now. Yeah, this never happens. But of course it's happening now. Alright. I'm just waiting to make sure everything's smooth and then we'll get going. Of course, this happens when I go and send out the link to all my platforms, right? Alright. We should be okay now. Alright. Yeah, we're not dropping any frames. Very good. See all these elements that need to come into play with doing lives. You need to make sure the internet connection's good. Need to make sure all these other things fall into place. It's quite an art here. But we're getting through it. I didn't want to restart the stream considering I shared the link out everywhere today. We should be okay now. Hey Zane, good to see you here. Yeah, everything's looking good on my end. Just a few minute delay here, right? Okay, so let's get this screen set up here. I'm making sure everything's smooth before I start reading, because the thing I don't want happening is this to just zonk out while I'm in the middle of reading. Alright, we seem to be good. Okay. So what I had to do was change my VPN to St. Louis. Funny how that works. I never had to do that until today. Like, I can't remember. It's been months. Okay, so just a recap of what I said at the beginning here. We're reading chapters 19 and 20 today. And if we hit our goal of super chats, which can start at $2 each, we hit 5 super chats today, I'll read a third chapter, which is chapter 21. And doesn't matter to me that it'll be extra time. It's really not that long of a chapter. But it'll help move us along. Because otherwise we might be doing 3 or 4 chapters next week. Because the next chapters are so short. But we did cover Stonehenge last week, and it was really, really eye-opening to me, and I'm sure everyone else, with the immensity of what it used to look like as opposed to what it looks like today. Alright. Yeah, we're running fine here, so let's, I guess, get into it, eh? We'll be starting chapter 19 from Alpha to Omega. It's page 174. And this is what we'll be talking about today. As you can see from the top, this is a 2-mile transmitter. But we'll be looking a little further into that. So let's get started, shall we? Chapter 19, from Alpha to Omega. Alpha Centauri, that curious star millions of light years from Earth which has excited scientists because of radio signals that apparently originate at its surface, may well be one of the goals of the space age. One of the scientific crutches that will help our first space travelers to limp to that destination may well be Omega. For well over a year, controversy raged in New Zealand as to whether the aerials of an Omega navigational station should be permitted to decorate one of the picturesque South Island valleys like a gigantic web spun by some psychotic spider. And in parentheses it says the C diagram. And that's what we're talking about today, is this Omega transmitter. Reports and comments have been thrown about, words have been distorted and quoted out of context to support one or another partisan cause, and evasions at government level have done nothing to help clarify the Omega story. Mainly the controversy has centered around this point. Would an Omega station assist Polaris submarines? If so, would not such a station become a primary target in the event of a major war, even if New Zealand were neutral? 8 of these so-called navigational radio stations are to be positioned in various localities around the world. The South Island of New Zealand was selected as the location for one of them. Already there are 4 stations in operation in Norway, Trinidad, Hawaii, and near New York. Supposedly, the full system of 8 stations is to be set up for the sole purpose of providing a global navigational network for shipping, submarines, and aircraft. No doubt the Omega stations will fulfill this purpose at maximum efficiency, as the concept is certainly far in advance of the wartime system known as LORAN, LORAN, or long-range navigation. Simultaneous readings from these or additional stations will give a position on any point of the Earth's surface with a half-mile accuracy. However, a very large number of New Zealanders, including scientists, university professors, and the general public, have expressed a fear that the installation of such a station in New Zealand would immediately make this country vulnerable to nuclear attack in the event of World War III. The fear comes from the belief, erroneous or not, that the hidden purpose of Omega is to enable nuclear submarines to obtain accurate fixes of position while still submerged, in order to carry out an attack. If this were true, then any country with such a station would obviously become a priority, a target for the enemy. Awesome, Zenray, thank you. We got our first super chat of the night. $4.99. I appreciate that, Zen. So is it a target for the enemy? But is this the real purpose of Omega, in fact? Possibly, but not probably. Nuclear submarines do not need this type of system. Inertial navigation systems already in use are far more accurate and reliable, and cannot be tampered with by any hostile nation or its agents. The official voice on Omega is speaking accurately when it declares that Omega is not essential for military forces of any nation. And real quickly, we'll look at the diagram again here. It says the aerial transmitter is 10 kilowatts. The carrier wires improve efficiency of aerial A but do not transmit. It also labels a small control hut. And then the description here says the wrist thick aerial wire is the only part transmitting. If a station is built on flat land at 1,000 feet high, the aerial is set up with an umbrella-shaped web of supporting wires around it, and the cost is much more than that of the mountain-slung aerial shown. So again, we have the transmitter, which is going vertical. That's labeled A, right in the middle there. That's 10 kilowatts. And then B is the carrier wires. And that's the one that spans 2 miles. And then as you can see, it's hanging 1,000 feet in the air. And then you have the control hut at the very bottom in the middle by the transmitter. So continuing on, then why should the Americans be so very anxious to establish Omega stations in other countries, and against the popular wishes of the people of those countries? There is certainly a widespread belief that something is being concealed about the Omega plan, and that all the facts are not being revealed. Already the press has informed us that persons involved with the operations of these stations will be covered by the Official Secrets Act, and this is cited from the New Zealand Herald on the 2nd of July, 1968. Would this be reasonable if Omega were not of a military nature? I, for one, do not believe so. Then can there be some other reason besides the officially stated one for building a particular station at a particular position? As might be expected, a rather large shoal of red herrings has confused the whole Omega issue even further. Deliberately, I suspect. 3 different likely sites for New Zealand's Omega were selected for assessment in the South Island, and a couple more were suggested for localities in South Australia for good measure. When the normally easygoing New Zealand public began to show signs of uneasiness about the project, inferences were given by way of the daily press that the Omega project would be handed over to Australia, with the station to be built in New South Wales or Tasmania. This possible switch in plans may have been designed to have a psychological appeal to the New Zealand public. The implication was that New Zealand was being so difficult over the whole affair that this peaceful little dominion didn't jolly well deserve an Omega station. So Uncle Sam would give it to Australia instead. So this is a U.S. project. If this indeed was the ruse, it was not altogether a howling success. The public tended to breathe a little more easily at the thought that after all, their country would not become a potential target. But still, there were loud demands that the government should turn down any offer for Omega, even if the station were to be presented as a gift. Let the Aussies have it by all means. Who wants a wooden horse sitting in their backyard? So they're already saying this is something that would be used for something else that's not publicly admitted. There were months of this argument and counter-argument. Everyone got into the act, including university students who paraded carrying anti-Omega placards. Eventually, some decision had to be made. It was announced that a site close to Lake Pearson in New Zealand's South Island had been chosen for Omega. This locality happened to be the cheapest one assessed right from the beginning. The decision came as no surprise. Back in 1968, I had been approached by a group of university students who asked me to plot the proposed positions assessed for the station to see if there was any connection with the UFO grid which I had discovered, or if there were any other geometric evidence to explain Omega as anything other than a sophisticated civilian navigational system. I informed the students that I was not particularly interested in their battle over the Omega issue, as I had more than enough evidence of my own to check into regarding UFO activity without getting mixed up in what had all the earmarks of becoming a political free-for-all. At the same, I did make a rough check of the geometric positions of the sites that had been mentioned, and I found that the Lake Pearson area was the only one that showed any connection with grid harmonics. I left it at that after telling the students that I had no further interest in the matter. If this was indeed the area which was eventually to be selected, then, at that time, I might become a little more interested. In April 1969, the decision was announced. Lake Pearson was to be the site of the Omega Station. The scientists had sifted through all the pros and cons for this site, and that, they said, Lake Pearson was the one. The most magnificent and suitable location upon which to place the box of tricks reverently called Omega. So now I was most definitely interested. Out came my worn maps and log tables. The latitude and longitude of the lake were checked once more, and a recalculation made of the harmonic probabilities of the area. I was convinced that the scientists were up to something that they had no intentions of revealing to the public at large. I calculated a position just northwest, and it's all dashed northwest, of the lake, which I thought to be a likely site for the station, and forwarded the information to the air attaché at the American Embassy in Wellington, in the hope of sparking some sort of comment from somebody in authority there. I was not sure what harmonic principle the station would be built to incorporate, so I had to work by hunch alone. However, I was certain that when the exact site was known, a mathematical connection with the grid system would be evident. A direct answer was not forthcoming, but a few weeks later I met the air attaché by chance in Auckland, and he told me that the calculations I had sent to Wellington were, quote, not too bad, end quote. I felt that at least I was getting close. Some months later, I received further information and found that the position I had chosen was evidently in error. Cathie, the newspaper, published by the Students' Association of Canterbury University, published a lengthy article on the Omega issue, and their illustration of a rough map showed the actual position to be at the southeastern end of the lake. And it says here the sea map. So we'll look at that shortly. The area where the aerial was to be suspended was enclosed by 4 mountains. At the northern end, Purple Hill at 5,505 feet, and Mount St. Bernard, 5,119 feet. And at the southern end, Constitution Hill at 4,409 feet, and Broken Hill. So this is map 7. This is a photocopy of an article in the University of Canterbury newspaper, Cathie. So here's the proposed antenna location. These are the points that they were looking at. These 2 down here and those 2 up there. So that's where they would suspend the cables. And you can see it's right next to a lake. So I'll read this up here for you right now. Lake Pearson locals not told about Omega. Run holders in the Lake Pearson area did not know about that their district had been chosen as a possible Omega transmitter site, a Cathie reporter discovered during a visit to the area 2 days after the physics department and Cathie simultaneously exposed the military nature of Omega. They had been aware... Hold on. says they had been aware of never ask our permission. Does that sound right? Oh, this is running all over the place. Hold on a second. Yeah, this is pretty unreadable. I don't know what to really tell you here. So you have this chunk of the newspaper, but you also have this column on the side, but it doesn't match up with the words over on the left. I'm sorry, that's pretty terrible. Okay, actually, I think I figured it out. Just really quickly. See right where this line is? Purple, then finishes up here at Hill. And then it continues down on this side. So I'll read it now. Just it was worded very oddly here. They had been aware of never ask our permission. The presence of what they said one run holder. Yeah, see, it makes no sense. Assumed we're some sort of... Okay, it's in 3 parts. Okay. That's really confusing. So there's one chunk here, and then the second chunk's in the middle, and then the third chunk's at the end. So I will read that through now. They had been aware of the presence of what they assumed were some sort of government surveyors in the district, but did not see anything sinister in this, as they were used to government departments trespassing. Quote, they seem to think that they own the country and never ask our permission, end quote, said one run holder. One person, a Bach owner who was also a radio ham, did meet the surveyors and learned that some sort of transmitter was planned. Residents understand that the transmitter antenna is to be erected between Purple Hill and Constitution Hill, as shown in the map, across a valley running from the Flock Hill Homestead towards Avolka railway station. One end of the antenna would be on Flock Hill Station and the other on Craigieburn Station. Both properties are leased from the University of Canterbury and the Educational Reserve 1577. About a mile away on the edge of Lake Pearson, there is 320 acres of Crown land originally set aside as a township reserve, and it is presumed that the Americans would build their base there if Lake Pearson is the site selected. So again, looking at the map, there's a township reserve. There's a proposed antenna. These are the connector points on the mountain. Here's Lake Pearson, and then this is a highway running through. And then this is a railway. I was going to say railroad, but it's a railway. And it's not that much of an area. You can see here the measurements 1 mile. All right. So we're going to carry on. We're almost finished with this first chapter here. Local residents believe that the 2-mile aerial will be slung somewhere between Purple Hill and Constitution Hill. The properties at either end of the aerial were said to be leased from the University of Canterbury itself. It seemed to me that it was quite a coincidence that the land to be used was university-owned. In any event, the Cantor report spelled out for me a very small area which I would easily be able to check in order to find any interesting mathematical harmonics. My original calculations, as published in my earlier work, Harmonic 695, indicated that the most likely position of the aerial would be 43 degrees Alright, I'll just show you here. South and east. 43 degrees south, 171 degrees east. The associated geometric harmonics were found to be closely related to reciprocal values of the speed of light and time, according to the accuracy of my work at that period. I have extended my research considerably since then, and now have access to computers which help to simplify the work and allow a wider coverage of all the geometric perimeters discovered so far in the search for harmonic relationships. The best theoretical position, according to present knowledge, calculated by computer, would be this right here. Recent research has indicated that the latitudes of several scientific stations have been calculated in such a way that the relative displacements from the equator and the North or South Pole will create a geometric harmonic. So, the latitude of 43 degrees or 43.14378 degrees would have a displacement as follows. Distance from the South Pole, 46.85622 degrees. Distance from the equator, 43.14378 degrees, and the difference is 3.712440 degrees. The harmonic of 371244 is the mathematical reciprocal of the geometric value derived from the unified equation 2693645. The position, because of the latitude, would allow a tuned electromagnetic wave transmission to resonate in harmony with the unified fields. These values are explained more fully in my later book, The Bridge to Infinity, Harmonic 371244. And we already have this listed down as another book to get here. All right. The longitude position also created an interesting harmonic. As all calculations are related to each section of 90 degrees, we process the longitude as follows, with the tangent of this angle being 6.94444. The harmonic 694,444 is the reciprocal value of the speed of light in free space. 144,000 minutes of arc per grid second relative to the Earth's surface. A further harmonic is evident in the relationship of the transmitter to the north grid pole. And we have, again, the coordinates right there. The great circle distance between the 2 points, accurate to within 0.45 minutes on the computer, is 7,844.6296 minutes of arc, or nautical miles. If this value is multiplied by 6 3 times in order to raise the harmonic, a value of 1694440 is found. Recent research indicates a direct association of this harmonic with mass, gravity, and communication. The communication harmonic would also, in theory, be built into the aerial system itself, and a further exercise on the computer suggests the following. Height of aerial given as 1,000 feet. A theoretical value of 996.72393 feet would be equal to 0.1639348 minutes of arc relative. Multiply by 6 twice to raise the harmonic. 5.9016548, which is the reciprocal harmonic of 0.169444. Communication. All right. During March 1971, it was announced in a New Zealand newspaper that the Americans had finally decided that the Omega Station would not be established in New Zealand. On Friday, August 11th, 1978, an Australian newspaper published an article which stated in part, quote, "Federal government will call tenders tomorrow for an Omega navigation station to be built at Darriman in Gippsland. The building is expected to be ready in mid-1980, and a station is scheduled to be operational before the end of 1980. It will have a 427-meter high steel lattice tower to carry the antenna system. The antenna system comprises 16 cables supported from the top and extending to the ground about 730 meters from the base in an evenly spaced array." End quote. I will leave my readers to hunt out the exact location of this one and calculate the appropriate harmonics. I would be interested in any results which look promising. Once I had taken a good hard look at my theoretical calculations, I felt some satisfaction with the results. I thought the next steps would be to put the station into my original grid map to see just how it fitted into the system. The various positions I have calculated over the years have all been within a few hundred feet of each other, so the relationship to the world grid system remains the same on the large-scale map. It at once became obvious that the position was an ideal one. The station fitted onto the grid as though one had been tailor-made for the other. It says also see the map. I produced the grid map years before Omega was ever heard of, and I have no claims to being clairvoyant. It can be no accident that the site fits in so neatly with the grid system. I'm certain that the station was planned years ago by those in charge of the Earthbound project to explore the grid system. From Alpha to Omega, from the beginning to the end, from Earth to the stars, there are some on this planet who already have possession of all the necessary knowledge to make citizens of space of us all. When will they let us in on the secret? And here, map 8 says, section of original grid map published in Harmonic 33 from 1968. Calculated position of Omega Station plotted into map in August 1970 shows possible correlation with UFO grid. There we go. So you see down here, Christchurch, New Zealand. Here's the plotted position of the Omega Station. All right. So that's it for chapter 19. So I really never have heard of this transmitter project until now. So this is all new information to me. You have to wonder, since this time, how many other Omega transmitters were built, and how did the project evolve over time to now? I would assume that they're still using cables to run these systems. And they've probably experimented with wireless Omega transmitters, but I think the hard lines are the best way to go about carrying experiments out. Alright, so now we have chapter 20, titled Something in the Air. Let me know how you're all doing out there. Again, thank you, Zenray, for the donation. I appreciate that. We got a super chat, one super chat. We're trying to aim for 5. A total of 5 for today. If we do that, we'll read an extra chapter. But this is good here. We'll pick up with chapter 20 right now. On Saturday, the 7th of December, 1969, the Bramall family were settling in to watch their favorite TV program, High Chaparral. Just before it was due to start, at around 8:25 p.m., all power in the district was suddenly cut off. A violent lightning storm was lighting up the sky to the southeast, with bright, long drawn-out flashes following one another in a spectacular sequence. Ted Bramall went outside to watch the storm and immediately saw a brilliant object which he later described as resembling a, quote, large fluorescent light, end quote. Jennifer Bramall came out of the house to join him, and they watched it for 5 minutes. When the power came on again, Ted telephoned to the power board and was informed that the entire district had been blacked out, probably as a result of a violent electrical storm in the vicinity of Rotorua. The object the Bramals watched was large and very bright. It hung in the air with a backdrop of dark clouds, stars showing through breaks in the clouds, which Ted glanced at from time to time, gave him an idea of its great size. After hovering motionless, the object moved slowly and deliberately, tilting over so that cone-like projections on its bottom surface, covering a great deal of the area and looking like, quote, oval dark areas, end quote, could be clearly seen. To the further astonishment of the watchers, the light emanating from the object pulsated to match the brilliance of the lightning flashes. Spine-like projections of colored light, blue, green, and red, radiated sideways and downwards. Apart from this single slow-motion roll, the object remained stationary. Later, in a statement to an investigator, Sam Ricks, the Bramals declared that the object gave the impression that it was constructed, a machine of some kind. They later made independent drawings of what they had seen. Their statement and their sketches are in my files, along with many other eyewitness reports and sketches from different parts of the country. Sightings like this are now a very frequent occurrence. But since officially UFOs don't exist, the news media are inclined to leave them alone. But the Bramals know they saw something, an object that confirms in all respects the typical descriptions of UFOs. At least they know that they are not alone. Here's another detailed report, again accompanied by sketches made soon after the sighting and signed as a truthful record by Y.R. Plant, E.F. Plant, S. Plant, B.R. Plant, and M.C. Clapp, all of Auckland. The sighting took place at Te Kaha, East Coast. At about 9 p.m. on the evening of the 22nd of January, 1969, we noticed a bright flashing light that appeared to be traveling behind the ridge of the hills opposite. It became stationary, and brilliant flashing continued as it appeared to revolve. At the same time, at intervals of approximately 2 minutes, a lightning-like flash from a point slightly further south lit up the sky. It came from behind a small black cloud above the mountains, and the flashes were directed at the revolving light. A similar occasional flash was seen much further south. There were 5 of us, my wife and I, my 2 teenage sons and their friend, watching this phenomenon for about an hour when we realized that there was much activity going on in the sky. What appeared to be a small star would suddenly fall at exceptional speed and then hover in the sky. At one time, there were about 6 of these fallen lights, one of which disappeared towards the south in a hopping motion. In the eastern sky, there was a large bright light with rays emanating from it, and below this a small star hovered up and down. As we watched, a long dark cloud formed above the mountain range. After observing this continual activity for 3 hours, 2 lights were seen to rise from behind the hills. One light was red and the other a bluish-green rotating light, and they gave the impression of being attached to one object as they moved in conjunction with each other. This remained stationary for 30 minutes before moving slowly up behind the long cloud. At this time, the flashing on the ground ceased. 20 minutes later, 5 red lights, evenly spaced, rose above the mountain range, hovered for about 5 minutes, then traveled back and forth above the hills. This was still occurring when we eventually retired. 4.5 hours after first sighting the flashing light. Group observations are obviously of much greater interest to any investigator than casual individual sightings. Stories and data can be checked from one observer to another, and greater faith can be placed in such reports when they are found to match important aspects. New Zealand's most fascinating group sighting came in December 1968, when a number of primary school pulpits at Timuta School, Havelock North, the center of a region which has yielded sighting after sighting in the past 4 years, reported seeing a flying saucer at close range. All 6 children agreed on the object's size and shape, and on having been scared by it. They reported that they saw both a hatch and an antenna as the saucer-shaped object hovered at low altitude over some poplar trees, that it made a clicking noise, and that it was about half the size of the school's swimming pool, which they were attending at the time as a non-swimming class. They drew the attention of their teacher to the object. Suddenly, it shot upwards and traveled off in the direction of the nearby town of Hastings, leaving a vapor trail behind. A teacher reported that he watched the same object for about 10 minutes as it moved backward and forward across Hastings. The nearby aerodrome and the Civil Aviation Department at Napier confirmed that there were no aircraft in the area at the time of the sighting. Gavin King, aged 10, described it like this for the Hawke's Bay Herald Tribune, which ran the story on the 20th of December. Quote, "It was round with 3 rings on top. There were lights all around the bottom, and there was a sort of hatch on the side. It made a clicking noise like a clock." End quote. That's interesting. And hey, Paul, good to see you in here. I'm doing well. I hope you are too. I'm glad you got the catch tonight. So going on with these, we're going through descriptions of what these children saw at their school. Next is Graham Hebden, age 10. Quote, "At first, the object looked like a bird, but it grew to the size of about half the school's swimming pool as it finally hovered over the trees." End quote. Peter Taylor, aged 9. Quote, "It had things hanging from it. They had round things attached to them." End quote. Gavin King and other pupils later made sketches of what they had seen. Meanwhile, a Havelock North woman said she had seen something, evidently the same object, for about 5 minutes. Mrs. M. Berg of Lipscomb Crescent said she stood at her door and watched the object approach from the southeast. Quote, "It was the noise it made that caused me to look up," she said. "It was a funny noise, something different." End quote. She watched the object until it was straight above her house. And a note from the author on the bottom of page 185 says, A similar clicking noise was associated with UFOs as described in Harmonic 33. So clicking like a clock, that's what they're describing this object they're witnessing as sounding like. She said that the bottom of the object was like the bottom of a boat, and that it had square wings. These reports were made just 4 months after some other odd occurrences nearby, at Taradale. John Dow, aged 19, apprentice joiner, and his friend Paul Franklin were out at the Taradale dump one September evening looking for rats to shoot. It was around 9:30. Suddenly, the two youths heard something that they were later to describe as, quote, sounding like thunder, end quote. The ground beneath their feet shook. Looking up to the sky, they saw some 30 moving lights, at intervals disappearing from view. They watched the spectacle for about half an hour, and finally, mystified and excited, they went home. Lights had been seen in the sky over this area many times during the past few months. Just 1 year before, verified sightings of UFOs were reported from the nearby Hastings area. At that time, I plotted these on the grid map of New Zealand and found, not too much to my surprise, that the verified positions all fell neatly on parallel latitudinal lines of the grid. So these UFOs are showing up on a grid system. So strange objects in the sky were not too unusual in this area. The following night, the two boys returned to the dump. It was a Saturday, and they planned to keep a vigil. They saw nothing of interest and went home slightly deflated. On Sunday night, they were driving in John Dow's car. Paul, looking back, spotted a bright white light, but there was nothing of particular note to record. 2 nights later, they were driving near the Waihohiki Golf Course, and I'll spell that out. Waihohiki Golf Course, when they saw a green light in the sky. The color changed to red, and soon they saw a, quote, pencil of light, end quote, flash across the sky. The following statements were given in evidence at the Napier Magistrates Court when John Dow, charged with dangerous driving, pleaded not guilty. In court, he said, quote, as we were passing the Taradale motor camp, Paul, who was staring out the back, suddenly let out a scream that this pencil of light was coming at us. I saw it in the mirror. Paul dived out of his side. His feet kicked mine. End quote. Dow was pitched half out the car. He went on, quote, I started to get up, and Franklin said, for God's sake, stay down. They are after us, end quote. Now out of control, the car plunged on for about 200 yards along Taradale's Gloucester Street and finally crashed through the plate glass window of a fruit shop. It was the sudden end to the chase that brought the two youngsters first to hospital and later to the magistrate's court in Napier. Prosecuting was Sergeant W.T. Pender. After Dow described the light which chased the car, as being about 2.5 feet across. Sergeant Pender asked him what he thought it was. Dow answered, quote, "A flying saucer," end quote. The prosecutor asked whether the colored lights could have originated from an explosion in the dump. No, Dow asserted. They had watched the lights in the sky for about half an hour. Mr. W.K.I. Dugall dismissed the dangerous driving case against Dow. However, before sending Dow on his way, the magistrate had something to add. He declared, quote, "Most of these lights people see have a natural cause, and the flying saucer in hot pursuit might have been the lights of a car coming from around the corner. The sooner he, Dow, talks to a sensible adult about the matter, the better," end quote. Well, that's kind of really dismissive considering he said they were watching it for over half an hour. That's not a car coming around the corner, sorry. Just blatantly lying, and this is in the court. However, two pertinent facts remain. The story given by the two of the youths in explanation for their car crashing through a shop window was accepted by the police. The magistrate admitted that Dow had gotten into such a state of mind that he had acted involuntarily when, quote, "something had distracted him," end quote. The second point is that the insurance company concerned with the damages to the car also accepted Dow's story. This at least was something new in New Zealand. A statement I have on file from Paul Franklin shows that other people in the district, including at least 2 policemen, had witnessed the lights in the sky over Taradale. That's wild. The court accepted the explanation, but then tried to change the story of what they explained they saw. It's wild. There have been countless other sightings, not only of objects in the sky, but of evidence showing that strange objects have landed. Puara South Road stretches for a mile across a gravel surface on the Haraki Plains. And that's spelled Hauraki. It heads into an uninviting scrubland where manuka bushes predominate. Here, a 50-acre block of land is owned by a former dairy farmer, Bert O'Neill, who on the 4th of September 1969 made a startling discovery. Something, it appeared, had landed on his property, leaving a bleached circle of manuka about 50 feet across. There were 3 V-shaped grooves of disturbed peat soil in the center of the circle, each about 2 or 3 inches deep and spaced precisely 9 feet apart. Nowhere had the manuka been crushed, leading Mr. O'Neill to theorize that, quote, 3 legs had been slid into the ground and then splayed outward, end quote. A reporter for one of Auckland's weekend newspapers wrote, quote, "The manuka, which is extremely healthy elsewhere, seems to have been bleached gray, white, and dry by heat inside the clearly defined circle. The scrub has definitely not been burned," end quote. The Gatea circle caused considerable excitement, and this is spelled Ngatea. It caused considerable excitement, more than any previously reported UFO sighting in New Zealand. In fact, for here at least was something tangible. Hordes of people came by car for days after, trampling about the area in search of heaven knows what. As usual, official investigators were among the late arrivals, and before before long, the explanations were coming at rapid-fire pace. The area had been hit by a, quote, blight, end quote. Thus, the gray-white manuka. The marks in the ground had been made by pigs rooting for feed, and so on. A fungus was found to be growing on the manuka, and this was acclaimed as the cause of the condition of the scrub, although no one was able to state why only a near-perfect circle had been attacked. Then it was found by scientific examination of the manuka that the branches and trunks were dry of sap and had been, quote, cooked, end quote, from the inside out, rather as if they had been exposed to extreme radiation. A TV garden show host, Reg Shibnall, it's pronounced or spelt Chibnall, made independent tests on the soil from inside the circle and from outside. He found that seed grew normally in the latter soils, but produced miserable, diseased-looking plants in pots containing soil from inside the circle. The then Minister of Science favored the fungus and pigs version and dismissed the whole affair. And that's the Minister of Science for you. Meanwhile, scientists at Auckland University concluded that dead spiders in the bleached manuka area had been killed from radiation. Mr. Don Lockwood of Waihi, that's spelled Waihi, made another interesting discovery. 22 feet out from the center line position of the ground marks, the manuka showed signs of where the radiation had ended, and the rest of the tree had died. This point of demarcation was just above ground level, but increased in height up the trees the further to the south the checks were made. Tree and other samples were collected by Mr. H.L. Cook of Tauranga, and these were examined by a horticulturist in the same city, Mr. Stuart Menzies, who gave the following report. Quote, "The scrub is radioactive and has been cooked instantaneously from the inside outward. I know of no earthly source of energy which could produce this effect. The manuka was bleached dry, but showed no visible signs of burning. Every ounce of moisture in the plant had been instantaneously vaporized, and it was bone dry and brittle. This is most unusual in manuka, which normally takes a long time to dry out. Some kind of high-frequency radiation cooked the material from the inside outward. The energy received reduced the pith to black carbon, without the outside showing any sign of burning. The cells and the medullary rays were burnt by the sudden vaporization of cell sap. A meteorite or lightning could not do this, and it was too sudden for combustion," end quote. That's really highly detailed accounts here. And that's from a horticulturist, too. Mr. Stuart Menzies added that the process appeared to have been similar to that employed in infrared cooking. Quote, "but on an enormous scale," end quote. So the Gaeta Circle remains a mystery. Or the Gatea. Again, this word's spelled Ngatea. And the location, I believe, is in New Zealand. Mr. O'Neill wishes he had never found the area where something out of this world landed. He is tired of the neighborly ribbing he has been exposed to ever since. It is well known to me that radar operators at various airfields throughout New Zealand are constantly picking up unidentified objects in the sky on their screens. Official reports are filed, but these men seldom speak of what they have seen. More than ridicule, they fear losing their jobs, such as the official wall of silence. On numerous occasions, airfield authorities have become so excited over radar blips of unknown flying objects that incoming aircraft have been diverted in order to allow control to have a close look at the intruders. Other airfield workers frequently see objects in the sky that are certainly not aircraft, or birds, or marsh gas, or Venus in descent. In front of me now are two independent reports made by workers at Auckland International Airport concerning something that attracted their attention on the 3rd of December 1967. To protect the two workers concerned, I shall not give their names. Their signed reports are in my possession and are available to bona fide investigators. So here's the first report. Quote, while working at the airport, I saw two silvery to pale lemon lights across the sky from south-southwest to a north-northeast direction. They were convex on both sides. So, convex is going inward. Or, oh my God. No, it's convex is outward. It's outward. Concave would be inward. It's hard to show. Concave, convex, concave, convex. They were convex on both sides, so they were rounded on each end. And on the upper side was a small dome. They flew together for a short time until the lower one began to make sharp alterations in its altitude, zigzagging up and down. They were in sight for about 4 to 7 seconds. They finally disappeared from sight in a bank of clouds to the north. End quote. Hey, Beyond the Box. Hey, Jason H. Good to see both of you here. We're reading UFO reports right now in New Zealand. The second report is confirmatory. Quote, two saucer-shaped objects, silver in color, traversed the sky from south-southwest to north-northeast. They flew in formation for a little while. The lower saucer then moved jerkily about the other saucer until they both disappeared behind a big bank of clouds on the horizon to the north. Both objects traveled at an extremely high speed, in excess of 1,000 miles an hour. End quote. Both reports include drawings of saucer-shaped craft featuring a prominent dome. So much for a mere sampling of sightings and more dramatic events close to home. In every other country of the world, there have been reports of a similar nature. Strange objects in the air, on the ground, in the sea, the sudden appearance of alien beings, the discovery of peculiar artifacts and constructions. One of the most irritating kinds of report is the incompleted account. South American newspapers abound with half stories about UFOs, sudden appearances of saucers, their disappearance in the jungle, the setting forth of posses to track them down, and then silence. In October 1968, a group of climbers searched the Andes for a flying saucer base. They reported that they had found, but as a byproduct, so to speak, a, quote, fortress, end quote, of a previously unknown civilization. This is in the Andes Mountains. This was a region of Chile known as Talca, 150 miles south of Santiago. There had been repeated accounts of UFOs in the area, cars stopping and starting without explanation, out-of-season flowers blooming. The fortress comprised 2 platforms, each about 700 square yards, and made from 233 blocks of volcanic rock, each block with an average weight of 10 tons. February the following year, on the assumption that the Andes platform might in fact have been a kind of launching area for UFOs, or a cosmodrome was the word seized upon by the wire services. An expedition led by Humberto Sarnataro Bonald, a 32-year-old businessman and painter, prepared to explore the giant blocks as well as a cave said to be located beneath the platform. Many peasants and villagers in the area claimed they had seen flying saucers apparently taking off and landing in the mountain near the platform. Unhappily, the press has never informed us of what became of Bonald's expedition. Did it ever set off? What did they find? What was the secret of the cave? Meanwhile, around the same time, doctors in Colombia were reported to be baffled by the case of a man who died from a mysterious sickness after he reported seeing a flying saucer. The man was Arcesi Bermudez, 50, who became ill after he said he saw a blue and orange UFO at flashing lights in his back garden in Anolima, southwest of Bogota. He claimed to have approached to within 10 feet of the craft and then turned back to get a flashlight. As he was returning, the UFO flew off. A week later, Bermudez was dying, suffering from attacks of vomiting and diarrhea. Gastroenteritis was the diagnosis, but Bermudez's low temperature puzzled the doctors. Until the moment of death, he maintained his story of approaching close to a landed UFO. If there was an inquest, the findings were never published in the papers I read. The dead man's symptoms sound suspiciously like radiation poisoning. Closer to home, on the 28th of December 1968, a man in Goulburn, New South Wales, saw and spoke to a man from Saturn. At least that was the story being investigated by the late Dr. Moran Lintner, president of the Unidentified Flying Objects Investigation Center in Sydney, and Dr. D. Herbison Evans, an astronomer from the physics department of Sydney University. The man had the encounter with the alien, he said, while on a hunting trip near Goulburn. 10 years before, he had a near-identical experience in exactly the same spot while hunting for foxes. According to Dr. Lintner, quote, He says he shot at and hit something, which let out a terrific noise. Then there was a flash of light, and something, we don't know what, burnt through the arm of his coat and left a small mark on his arm. The mark took a year to heal, but before it healed, it grew in size and now measures 3 inches by 2.5 inches. It is exactly the same shape as the planet Saturn, a globe with a ring around it. End quote. Man, I haven't heard of something like that before. Yeah, Jason, we'll say a prayer for you tonight at the end of the broadcast here. We'll do a group prayer so everyone sends their intentions your way. On his more recent trip into the area, the man saw a craft of about 40 feet in diameter and some 10 feet in height. As he approached the craft, a being walked from the other side of it, a humanoid about 5.5 feet tall with long hair and youthful features. It wore silver-colored shoes. There was a conversation in English for about 3 minutes, during which the being revealed that it was from Saturn. With that, the being hurried back to the craft, which rose 15 feet above the ground, hovered, and then moved off. Before it disappeared from view, the man took 4 photographs of it. Man, why don't we have the photographs here? That would have been nice. The year 1969 was an eventful one for UFO researchers. As Argentine researcher Dr. Pedro Romanik, spelled Romanniuk, when the private John Kennedy University opened its biopsychosynthesis summer term of lectures at Buenos Aires, declared that both the Soviet Union and the United States possessed damaged flying saucers. The American prize, he said, had been taken when it fell at Alamogordo, New Mexico. According to Dr. Romanik, this fact had been brought to the notice of the U.S. Air Intelligence Center by the director of the Northwestern Observatory, Dr. Silas Newton. Quoting Dr. Newton, Romanik said that the extraterrestrial craft had small exit traps instead of doors, allowing the passage of small-sized beings only. Inside the seamless, hard metal craft were found 6 small dead bodies, said to be morphologically similar to man and probably dead from atmospheric decomposition following the failure of one of the doors to work properly. According to Dr. Newton, the ship was propelled by cosmic energy. The bodies were covered by a metallic transparent blue suit, resistant to scissors and blowtorches. That's fascinating. After Harmonic 33 was published, I began to receive correspondence from people in many parts of the world, anxious to pass on clippings, photographs, information, and theories. Much of the material received in this way has been of doubtful value, and some of it has been far out, quote, crank, unquote, work. There is one letter that I keep coming back to, though, and I'd like to check its contents. I hope to for myself someday. The letter is from a Scandinavian New Australian, and it has, in my opinion, a ring of veracity. I hope to meet its writer in person one day, and hunt both the dingo and the UFO he mentions. Here is the story in his own words. On my arrival in Australia in January 1958, I set out for the far northwest of Queensland and the Northern Territory in search of the dingo. It was during one day of my first explorations into the nearly inaccessible wilderness that I found the canyon with its, quote, saucer, end quote. I had walked into the canyon for about 4 hours and believe I had covered between 10 and 12 miles when I noticed something under an overhanging shelf, making the place partly a cave. I use the word something because it was rather hard to make out what it was exactly due to its coloring. The object was kind of gray. It could be grayish green, grayish blue, or grayish red. One could easily walk past it from a distance without seeing it. I watched it for some time before I continued into the canyon, which became deeper, and I never reached the end. On my return, I looked for the object but could not see it. Being a good bushman, I knew I was at the exact spot where I had seen it before, but there just wasn't anything there. I satisfied myself that it must have been something created by the light, but realized that the sun didn't reach down to the bottom of the canyon. To make sure, I picked up a pebble and threw it to where I supposed the object to be. The result was the stone was stopped in midair, or when it hit the object. It then slid down to the ground, and on impact with the rocky ground, the stone made a noise, although there had been no noise when it stopped in midair. I decided that whatever it was, it must have a shell or be a solid mass, but soft enough not to make a noise when hit by a stone. I then decided that whatever the object was, it was still there, but not visible to the eye. I left it at that and returned to my camp, deciding to take a closer look the next day. The next day I returned and found the object was again visible. I had brought with me a long piece of fencing wire and my transistor radio. I started to yell and make my presence known to whatever it was, and I admit I felt an idiot doing so, but nothing happened. Then I switched my transistor radio on, and when music came from it, the object started to react. I watched it closely. The object gradually faded away, but the process was so slow that it was hard to say exactly when it became invisible. I had brought the fencing wire with me to find out if the object were an electric phenomenon. I tied this long wire to a stick and reached into the nothingness. Then, with a match soaked in saliva and wiped, I touched the wire. Had the object been electrical, I should have felt a slight tingle in my fingers, but I did not. Gaining confidence, I took hold of the wire with my hands, but still I could feel nothing. When I clamped my teeth on the end of the wire and touched it with my tongue, I could feel some rhythmical vibration coming through the wire. The vibration seemed to change in rhythm when one yelled, played music, or threw a stone towards the invisible object. But even without any noise, a vibration kept coming from it. I've later seen the object change from visible to invisible, and again it was hard to follow the gradual changes from one state to another. I first encountered the object late in 1958, and during my stay in the area for about 8 years, I visited the canyon approximately 13 or 14 times, and each time it has been there, either visible or invisible. At first, I believed that my presence made it fade away, but since the first experience with it, I've been able to yell, play music, and throw stones at it without it fading away. I've looked at it by night, and it doesn't give off any light, and it's only harder to see. I'm sure that whatever it is, it's harmless. I admit I tried not to interfere too much with it, in case it was capable of retaliating. What I could see of it, it had no windows, doors, or any other parts, such as holes, etc. The underside of the overhanging shelf seemed to sweat. It is moist, whereas the whole area, including the canyon, is bone dry. There have been years between some of my visits, and at times only months, but it has always been there. And that's the end of the account. Whatever this object is, it's nothing like anything we've ever heard of originating from this planet. Could it be a craft cunningly hidden in an isolated canyon, protected by a force field until its crew comes back to claim it? And where are the crew? Blending with the crowds on Bondi Beach, mingling with captains of industry in Sydney, staked out somewhere handy to the vast and top-secret American Space Research Station in the Australian desert. A space station so secret that even Australia's Prime Minister has admitted he knows little of what is going on there. One of the most recent records of a visit by an extraterrestrial spacecraft consists of the Alberton photographs. Ellis E. Matthews of Alberton, South Australia, had some unused movie film left in his Paillard Bolex camera when he stepped onto the veranda of his home one evening in 1967. So, by the way, a Bolex camera, that's spring-loaded, where you have to crank it up so that the tension in the spring strengthens. And then when you hit the record button, basically, to let the film play through, the spring unwinds at the rate of, I believe it's, you could change the frame rate. You could speed up the film, slow it down, do slow motion, or speed it up to do fast motion. But it's a camera that requires no batteries. From where he stood, he saw about 1 mile distant and between 15 and 20 degrees above the horizon a UFO. Using a 1.9 aperture and with full zoom, he shot off his remaining film, focused on the subject, a total of some 50 frames. It was some 8 months later that he had the film developed, by Ilford, Australia, Oakley, Victoria. Both Mr. Matthews and his wife have provided notarized statements as to what they saw in the sky. The film was subsequently sent to me by Mr. Matthews, and with his permission I forwarded a section of it to International UFO Research and Analytic Network in New York for intensive analysis. After detailed microscopic study, Major Coleman von Kavitsky, project director of ICUFON, forwarded a full report from which is quoted the following conclusions. There's 3 of them. Number 1, the object is unidentifiable as any earthly, commercial, or military vehicle. The self-illumination and light streaks cannot be identified as position lights as demanded by international aviation regulations. Number 2, a meteor or satellite could not be stationary for 10/18ths of a second and could not present a clear-cut image of its form and shape. And point 3, the filmed aerial vehicle is in its form and type fully identifiable with what are popularly termed, quote, flying saucers. Mr. Matthews' film was shot in color. The flying object on the crucial frames, when seen projected on a screen, shows a disc with a, quote, cabin, end quote, beneath it. There are lights around the periphery of the disc, and there is light streaming out from what appears to be a port on the cabin. Most interesting of all, silhouetted in this port light is a figure, vaguely humanoid in shape. By comparing the first frames of the sequence with the last, it is observed that the figure is in movement. I'm going to try to see if I can look that up to show here at a later time. This is one of the best UFO series of photographs ever made. Experts have declared it to be genuine, and Mr. Matthews' integrity has never been in question. He has never made any attempt to seek commercial gain from his remarkable film, and has sought no publicity whatsoever. What we have on this film strip is undoubtedly a genuine series of pictures of a UFO, complete with a being who might be its pilot. This chapter has been a melange of seemingly unrelated and unsolved mysteries. A flying object of small size pursues a pair of teenagers driving around a small country town. Investigators follow up UFO reports in the Chilean countryside and discover a cosmodrome. Something lands in the bleak outbacks of the Hauraki Plains and leaves a wide circle of dying scrub, its woody parts cooked from the inside outward by radiation of an unknown kind. School children, their teacher, and an independent housewife sees a UFO in the skies of Napier, the children observing it at sufficiently close quarters to be able to draw the object in detail. Radar equipment at airfields pick up UFO blips as a matter of routine. But stop! UFOs don't exist. The Condon report says so. It is reminded of the story of the bumblebee. This clumsy-looking creature, with its vast bulky body and its fragile wings, is patiently, and according to all the laws and rules of aerodynamics, incapable of flight. But in its blissful ignorance of the situation, the bumblebee flies anyway. Until it should develop a sound grasp of aerodynamics, and then realizes it is breaking the law, it will continue to fly. UFOs don't exist. They couldn't possibly exist. They don't fit into any branch of Earth knowledge. Therefore, they are not. Meanwhile, as each month goes by, reports of UFOs all over the world continue to mount up. Thousands of people every year see them, approach them, are made nauseous by them. Some even die from exposure to them. Is the official denial of UFOs based on sincere disbelief? Or is there a vast snow job, a monumental cover-up in operation? If Senior Bermudez of Bogota left a widow and bereaved children, they might be the ones to answer these questions. And with that, we have finished chapter 20. And chapter 21 is actually pretty short. How y'all hanging in out there? Oh God, we're at an hour and 45 minutes. Well, I thank Zenray for the super chat. I appreciate you doing that. So we had a goal of getting at least 5 super chats tonight, and that was to happen before the end of this chapter 20, so we didn't hit it. But I thank you, Zen, for the super chat. But if we hit our goal moving forward at any of the other parts of this series, I will read more chapters in one stream. So while I'm trying to keep this within 2 hours, sometimes we'll go past that. And yeah, we'll keep chapter 21 for next week. So we got chapter 21, chapter 22. And really, we can do chapter 23 as well. But yeah, so we're gonna now do a short prayer for Jason H. So Jason, let's see here. Jason's dad is going in for a big surgery tomorrow. So I'll lead the prayer right now for Jason's dad. Heavenly Father, Creator, we ask you for a successful surgery for Jason's dad tomorrow, that there will be no complications and that it'll go over smoothly. And please put Jason's mind at ease that this surgery will be successful and that his dad will recover well and quickly. And we also had, I read in the chat, we had reports of people feeling ill from other negative people that were engaging in Josh's stream last night. So anybody who's not feeling well from that, which I didn't have any idea about, but anybody feeling ill from that as well, please, Heavenly Father, Creator, help them recover, and please protect us in the name of Jesus Christ. So there we go. And I thank you all for participating in that with me as well. So that'll do it for today's stream. I really appreciate you all being here. Thursday we'll have Bermuda Triangle at 8 p.m. Central Time. And Friday is our members-only Great Lakes Triangle series. And that will become public eventually. But for the time being, we're doing members only for that series. And hopefully on Sunday, we'll have another show going. I am considering Saturday doing something Civil War related. So I've been thinking on this for a little while. And I do have a lot of information on Illinois being involved in the Civil War that I'd like to go over. And part of that includes President Lincoln, of course. But I do plan on doing a new Saturday morning show. And, yeah, that's eventually going to come to fruition. So I'm slowly building up this weekly format again. It's taken a few weeks for me to just get back into the hang of this after taking a break. So thanks for being here, everyone. And Until the next one. Class dismissed.